Derek Carr had a very uninspiring year in New Orleans as he was tied for 14th out of 35 in expected points added, which if you don't know what that stat means, I have a video that breaks it down. It's truly one of the best stats around. In addition to that, he was 16th in quarterback rating. His supporting cast, which is based on the PFF grades of his receivers and pass blocking, was ranked number 22. So in all, he ranked as my 19th best quarterback, so a little bit below average, which is about what you could expect for Derek Carr. He's usually teetered around being average to below average throughout his career, and it's just more of the same so far in New Orleans. At backup quarterback, Spencer Rattler is a high upside option with basically no floor, so he is hard to evaluate. He's basically the opposite of Derek Carr in that if he hits, he's going to be a fantastic quarterback, but he has no certainty whatsoever as to what he's going to be. He was drafted in the 5th, but at one point he was thought of as being a first-round talent, so it's even further more difficult to evaluate him. As we move to the supporting cast, make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, because it makes a massive difference in how the video will perform. With that said, the O-line for New Orleans was pretty poor. They were 28th in pass block win rate and 15th in run block win rate. Compared to last year, they should be pretty similar, but a bit worse. Talise Fuaga was drafted in the 1st and was my 14th best player in the draft, so he should help make sure that the O-line doesn't get much worse as he replaces Ryan Ramczyk, who is the best offensive lineman for New Orleans, but is going to miss the season due to knee issues. Regarding Fuaga, the average first-round rookie tackle has a 64 PFF grade, which is notably lower than Ramczyk's 74 grade, but Fuaga stands a chance to be better than the average rookie because he's a better prospect than the average first-round tackle prospect is. He's an absolute mauler in the run game and is very strong, so that helps him in pass protection. So he is a good prospect and should, again, help make sure that the offensive line doesn't just completely fall off a cliff. What's going to hurt them, though, is Nick Saldiveri will replace James Hurst at guard, and that's a decline as Hurst was solid and Saldiveri is not particularly good. Their depth is Oli Odo, who is a competent backup and not much more than that. They also have on the inside Lucas Patrick, who is not inspiring either, but is a competent depth piece, so they have some protection if anybody gets hurt further, but it's going to be a clear decline. Regarding their weapons, they're quite solid and should help mitigate just how poor the offensive line is. Chris Olave was a really solid number 1 option as he was 16th in yards per game and 40th in yards per reception. Rashid Shaheed is a solid number 2 also, being 52nd in yards per game and 15th in yards per reception, showing that he's a real deep threat. Even if Derek Carr is not the most proficient deep ball thrower, Shaheed gets deep downfield in a hurry and separates rather nicely, so that helps assist Carr in being able to make the throws deep downfield. And with Olave, he's just great at basically everything. He can win deep downfield. He's a good intermediate threat. He can move the chains in short possession types of throws. So he's a really good option as well. I didn't mean to brush over him. Lastly, A.T. Perry was alright as a 4th option as he was 118th in yards per game and 1st in yards per reception. In very limited reps, he wasn't a qualifier for yards per reception. That's how little he received the ball. But if he did qualify, he would have been 1st in yards per reception. So that's something to keep an eye on. He can also win deep downfield, but just not at an effective enough clip because he wasn't getting very many opportunities. Now that he is a wide receiver 3, he should post better stats, so he's somebody to watch out for. He has some potential. Juwan Johnson is a serviceable tight end, being 24th among tight ends in yards per game and 20th in yards per reception among tight ends. They also have, of course, Taysom Hill, the do-it-all weapon that is part tight end, part running back, part quarterback, part punt returner, punt coverage guy, kicker, punter. I'm just kidding on a couple of those, but he is genuinely used in a variety of ways, so he's somebody to watch out for. Alvin Kamara was 26th out of 59 in PFF grade. He's a premier pass catcher and a solid runner even as he ages. He never really had that great deep speed, but he can run with some proficiency when he has lanes. Depth-wise, Cedric Wilson is a solid wide receiver 4, and Equinemius St. Brown is a solid backup wide receiver as well. At tight end, and again, attempting every other position, is Taysom Hill. And they also have a really good backup in Foster Moreau. So they have really solid depth, and they have really high-end talent in the receiving room as well. So they are actually a bit underrated, I would say, in the weapons regard. At cornerback, the Saints are good at their top 2, but really lacking at nickel, which is a bit worrisome because as far as your defensive backs go, you're only as good as your weakest link is, and they have a very defined weak link, so that's something to worry about, but they can shut down the number 1 and number 2 option for most teams with Paulson Adebo starting out. He ranked 15th out of 127 corners in PFF grade, so he is truly exceptional. He is super physical at 6'1" and is good against the run too, so there's no holes in his game, which is really nice. There's a lot of cornerbacks that are great in coverage, well, not great in coverage, but are good in coverage and struggle in the run defense. So it's nice that he has no issues in either facet of the game. And then the more star of the show that you've probably heard much more about, Marshawn Lattimore, was graded 50th by PFF. Despite the worst grade, he is a surer bet than Adebo, as Lattimore has years of good to great play, whereas Adebo has just one great year so far. Like Adebo, Lattimore is 6 foot tall and uses that to his advantage in a variety of ways. He's also a freakish athlete that ran the 40-yard dash in 4.36 seconds, which is elite, especially when you're 6 foot tall. When you're a bigger cornerback, you might not run as fast as some of the smaller guys, but Lattimore has it all, and he is just one of the premier cornerbacks in the league. I think PFF is doing him a little bit dirty by having him as the 50th ranked corner. I realize that defensive backs are very finicky year to year, but I think that he's better than that. I think at his worst, he's still maybe a top 20 or so cornerback. So he's definitely a premier corner still. And at nickel, where they really struggle, Alontae Taylor was ranked 120th out of all cornerbacks. He's awful against the run and is really poor against the pass as well. So there's nothing really to be too jazzed about with him. He is problematic in every way, so that's something to be worried about if you're a Saints fan. At safety, though, they are very well set. The Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu ranked 10th out of 95 safeties in PFF grade. Despite being 5'9", he's awesome in coverage and really good against the run, so he's one of the more versatile safeties in the league. He plays much bigger than that 5'9" height would suggest, so I have no issue with him at all. I think he is still one of the premier safeties in the league. Even if he doesn't get talked about as much as he did in years past, I think he's still playing at a very high level. The other safety, Jordan Howden, was graded 47th, according to PFF. He's better against the pass than the run, but he is solid in both regards. Regarding their defensive back depth, they have the man with the coolest name in the league behind maybe only Sauce Gardner. Kool-Aid McKinstry was drafted in the second and was my 25th best player in the draft. He's super physical in press and has the body for it at 6'1". Since 2019, rookie cornerbacks drafted in the second average a 60 PFF grade, which would be well above Alontae Taylor's 46 grade, but it remains to be seen if any of the 6-foot-plus cornerbacks can play in the slot or not. So it's not the most seamless fit. They do have fantastic depth on the outside if McKinstry doesn't play the slot, or if Adebo or Lattimore don't get put in there. But it's going to be problematic if they have just a glaring issue at nickel. On the D-line, New Orleans is pretty well set, even if they don't have a truly elite talent to lead the unit. Chase Young had an underrated year last season as he finished 17th out of 122 in edge pressures. He isn't great against the run, but he isn't bad either. Carl Granderson had a very good year as he ranked 24th for edge pressures. He is very solid against the run as well, so that's nice to play off of Young, who isn't, again, the greatest against the run. They have a real theme, though. They have big-bodied edges because Chase Young and Carl Granderson are both over 250 pounds, and then they have Cameron Jordan, who's like 280, 290. So they have big players that can set the edge, even if they aren't the most technically refined or having the greatest motor in all times, as Chase Young is kind of a little bit lackadaisical sometimes. But they are big-bodied, and that helps them set the edge with some proficiency. On the interior, Brian Brzee was tied for 39th out of 142 in defensive interior pressures his rookie year, which is awesome because that's a good ranking in general, but especially for defensive interiors that are young like that. They usually take a little bit to get the ground running, and he basically had no issues day one. He's not a great run defender, but I'll take a guy that can pressure the quarterback over being a good run defender any day of the week. He was horrendous, though, against the run. I don't want to gloss over that entirely. He wasn't just bad, he was really bad. So he has some real developing to do there, but he has a good template with being really strong against the pass. So that's something to be excited for as a Saints fan. Similarly, Nathan Shepard had success against the pass but not the run, being tied for 50th out of 142 for defensive interior pressures, but also being among the worst run defenders in the league. So their defensive interior is kind of backwards. They can get after the quarterback but not stop the run. That's not how a lot of teams draw it up, especially with the Saints, again, having these big-bodied players on the defensive line. It's not the most logical that they're so big and can't stop the run. As for their depth on the defensive line, though, Cameron Jordan is a very good edge defensive tackle hybrid. He was tied for 44th among edge rushers in pressures and is stout against the run. On pass plays, he can move inside to be a disruptor there as well, which really gets their pass rush clicking. Also at edge, Tanoa Kapasingo. I definitely butchered that, but I tried my best. That's got to count for something. Was 62nd in edge pressures despite being in a small rotational role. He is all right against the run, but very solid as a pass rusher. Lastly, Kalen Saunders is a very solid defensive tackle. He doesn't wow you with his stats because he was tied for 85th in pressures, but unlike the other defensive tackles they have at their disposal, Saunders is actually good against the run. So they have a nice blending of skills, and they have a lot of depth. They can really go at you in a variety of ways and keep everybody fresh, which is nice because that's really the name of the game for rushing the passer in the modern era, is having fresh bodies at your disposal at all times. And they have that, and then they have some good talent as well. It's not just depth. The linebacking core for the Saints is up and down. Demario Davis ranked 3rd out of 82 linebackers in PFF grade. He was top 20 in run defense, pass rush, and coverage, so he's the real deal in all ways. He's one of the most underrated players in the entire league because when we talk about elite linebackers, his name rarely comes up, but he is definitely still one of the elite. And for the down portion, Pete Werner was 67th in PFF grade. He's ranked worse year after year, as in 2021 he was 5th best, which is awesome. In 2022 he was 40th, and in 2023 he was 67th, as I mentioned. It's hard to say if he'll rebound or continue to slide, so I'm not really banking on him being much of anything, but fortunately for them they have a good third option as well. The depth at linebacker is Willie Gay. Gay was 72nd out of 82 linebackers. He's good against the run, but that's about it. Kaliki Hudson is also a depth linebacker. He was 51st, so he is a bit better than Gay, but Gay also has higher upside and a better pedigree as a former second rounder. Gay is also just super athletic, so that's something to be excited for because if he gets coached properly, he can be a very good player. He just hasn't been very consistent to this point in Kansas City, so it'll be interesting to see what his career looks like moving forward. Either way, they have depth at linebacker, and they have a real superstar in Demario Davis, so the linebacking core shouldn't be an issue, but it's far from guaranteed as well. In all, New Orleans is a very mediocre team. They continue to try to compete instead of rebuild, and that leads to them perpetually being in no man's land where they're good but not great. Derek Carr personifies that as he's an alright quarterback that's not good enough to win a Super Bowl. His offensive line will likely be a weakness, but maybe not a glaring one if Huaga can hit the ground running. His weapons are very good, but not good enough to carry him necessarily. Defensively, they have great outside cornerbacks and depth, but lack a nickel. Their safeties are quite good, and the defensive line is strong despite not having a clear superstar. Linebacker-wise, Demario Davis is one of the best in the business, and they have 3 other linebackers that are capable of good play. In all, there's definitely some things to like about New Orleans, but they need to rebuild instead of just try to compete. Those are my thoughts on the Saints. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more NFL content.